So this is Group D. We are presenting on sound and music in website design. I'm the group leader, and Anthony was the previous group leader, but he called off the semester. So we got Elsie, Wesley, and Ephraim. Ephraim will take us through the introduction part, and then Elsie, then Wesley, then followed by me will end in the conclusion. So Ephraim, there you.
The name is Ephraim, and I'll be taking you through the introduction. So basically, a website is a collection of web pages and related content that is identified by a common domain name. A domain name is an identification string that defines a realm of administrative and authoritative control within the internet, and it is published to at least one server. So for example, I'll have my name as Ephraim and .com. Now .com is the domain name. Now website designing, it is made up of various skills. A lot of disciplines come into the production of a website. To create a website, first of all, you must know how to create it, to maintain it, and also to have a graphic design of how it will look and how the person who is accessing that website, the steps, and to make it easier for the person accessing it. And so, according to Lee Tsang, Dr. Lee Tsang is the head of classical music in the University of Liverpool. He said that from the very outset that the visual, like what people see, is preferred more than what people hear. And because people avoid it for a variety of reasons, but the practical problems of bandwidth and space are diminishing. So bandwidth is the maximum data transfer rate of a network or an internet connection. So with time, as time evolves and the world evolves, people are starting to change their thinking about sounds and website. And so sound itself is now marketed on the web, where with website design businesses stressing the value and adding a range of sound products, including voiceovers, sound effects, musical loops, as a means of standing out in the competitive market. Everyone comes with this own idea to bring people to their website. Next. So today it is rare to come across a website which it's rare to come with a website that is playing with music playing in the background, either a small orchestral music or an instrumental. But a good piece of music, if you choose the right choice, it could boost in very different areas. So if these sounds were not there, the user experience will diminish due to the fact that good, but the ears could not be in the website. So we use sounds to occupy both spectrums of the brain, the visual and the audio. So for example, a familiar sound, just like a notification from WhatsApp. Somebody sends a message. When it reaches you, that notification, or the Skype notification message. Another example is the camera shutter sound. When you take a camera, someone will know you have taken him the picture or her the picture when he or she hears that sound or that snap sound. So these sounds around us, they help us to interact better with the application. Because for example, if I take the example of the camera, someone will not be sure if the camera has clicked if does not hear the sound. So generally, in this chapter, we're going to talk various forms in which sound is used and an overview of the emerging uses of sound in music and in website, exploring the good and the bads of the sound irritation, how to minimize sound irritation, and how to identify the user types. So forms in which sounds is used in website design. Number one is the auditory icons. These are short sound messages that convey information about an object or a situation. They help us to, they use natural sounds that we hear in our everyday life so that we can be able to relate it to us and increase the user experience. Musical earphones, they are structured audio messages based on the musical sounds which convey to the user information about the task being carried out. They are used musically with rhythmic tones and functions such as arbitrary leitmotifs, which are an associated melodic phrase that figure out or accompanies the appearance of the idea in the situation, therefore increasing the user experience. Next is the voiceover, also known as the offstage commentary. It's a production technique where that is not part of the narrative that is used in radio, television, and filmmaking. Now, the voiceover is read from a script of which the person isn't seen in the video, but his voice can be heard. The visual and the voiceover usually are merged together so that they can flow, in that what you hear is a reflection of what you are seeing. It is pre-recorded and placed on top of a video to bring its rhythmic. Musical loop is a section of piece of music that is cut in a way that it repeats continuously. It doesn't have an end. If it ends, it starts again. It's a repeated phrase that goes on and on until you stop it. Next. So the uses of sound and music in website design, first, it creates a positive user interaction, in that when you add, for example, auditory icons or musical icons to help users understand what is happening, the sound can reinforce even more the experience of the user to that interface, and therefore the preferred outcome could be achieved. Number two, it enhances the mood of the user. If someone is using a product or service in your website and the music background affects the emotions, or it targets the emotions of the user, the person will be more inclined that to a sad feeling. But if you choose a happy sound behind it, the audience will be more inclined towards the positive action. To reward users, using games to entertain their audience is becoming widespread, in that once somebody achieves a certain goal in a game, they are celebratory sounds.
Irritation might seem useful, annoying, and intrusive, inappropriate, and potentially embarrassing, like an instance where you might be browsing through the internet and find music suddenly starts playing. And some of the dangers that sound in website design faces are overuse, and unknown quantity, not knowing the user's sound capabilities and therefore how best to use them. For example, one is not able to know when the user will have the volume turned up or not. See, some users feel that it does not serve any purpose and could be an unnecessary in the websites. According to the studies that explore sound alertness, stimulation, and annoyance, they characterize sound irritation factors into three types. There are three types: type 1, 2, and 3. So I'll go to type 1, which is basic. A, there is abruptness of sound, overall loudness, length of interaction, sound irritation increases with length, frequency, height. Then type 2, which is complexity inducing, involves dissonance, overtones, irregular beats, irregular changes, repetitions, rates, fast changes, pitch. Then type 3, user type sensitive, in existence of muting facilities, especially for background music, which helps users to modify. Then there's arousal, which depends on familiarity, complexity, which affects judgment about fitness for purpose, including effectiveness of ordinary auditory icons, parameterization, and where appropriate, awareness and understanding of intertextual references. So the whole irritation increases with the prominence of types 1 and 2, which is basic and complexity inducing, and the absence of type 3. Familiarity and complexity are negatively correlated. It is important to note that in real life, the perceiver's sense of what is moderate can change according to the environment or the activity in which they are engaged. Web page design with
Proliferating.
or sounds initiated by non-click initiated cursor movement may increase irritation levels of type 2 and 2 characteristics. Web designers should take into account that the views of Heidegger 1975 to 1970 and Barton et al. 1994, who suggested that for website design initial irritation caused by highly complex sounds will usually be replaced by acceptance, whereas unvaried simple sounds can often lead to irritation. But however, in music, such assertions about the acceptance of complexity through familiarity are challenged to an extent by Hargreaves, who found that dislike of certain musical styles seems to override any repetition effects. In the case of the least familiar and the most complex musical styles, repeated. Next.
I've already pressed next. User types.
Oh, eh, user types in any form of marketing, the key to the most mainstream website design is the balance between satisfying the needs of what is known of target user types whilst remaining open wherever possible to generate appeal. Your audience is the primary factor of determining the kind of sound you will add to your website or app. If you're addressing young people, children, businessmen or women, or others, make sure the sound you choose resonates with the audience. Given the topic of your website is a critical factor, obviously the app is used for leisure times will have sounds that are very different than that of an official for financial purposes. While within website design, the divergence between sound for information and that of entertainment has become increasingly blurred, with many businesses now being encouraged to copy the middle group, which is entertainment, often through the use of sound, especially music offers a means of hooking the target user in web design. Sound in music is often used as a means of hooking the user.
I'm already on the next.
Designers can, huh?
Continue.
Ati?
Endelea tu.
Designers can best incorporate entertainment by first identifying the kind of sound or styles and activities that the public finds currently most appealing. Then choose a track that has popular longevity, not something that will just favor the construction of a track that capitalizes on the basic stylistic characters of such pieces. It is likely to pass rapidly into optimal familiarity because of its various elements through optimal are essential in variation of the prototype. And prototype is something that you have created considering a relation to Berlin inversion U curve model, whether or not the site's signature track is about to reach a phase of supraoptimal familiarity, introduce a necessary element of complexity to maintain interest. The relative importance of stabilizing optimal familiarity, complexity, and the significance of the prototype depends entirely on users' needs for cognition, which is NFC, and their involvement in the site when considering user types NFC. One needs specifically to ascertain whether or not the users are motivated to process the site's cognitive load. If users are unmotivated to use the low to said to be the low NFC, their involvement in the site is low. In order to increase motivation, one might increase the cognitive load through sound. For example, by increasing the volume, it takes more process than soft sound. If users are already motivated, their involvement to the site is high. One can make it easier for the user to process information by reducing the cognitive load. For this, North and Hargreaves advocates low, simple music rather than fast, complex music. Next.
I'm already on the next page.
Okay. A designer should at all costs avoid complex relational tasks, follow NFC. Like you should not make it so complex for them to understand because it takes them a longer period of time to get whatever message is being conveyed. Appropriate music focuses attention on the message. Low involvement consumers, by definition, are less motivated to process the product in terms of accompanying music. In order to target specific markets, website designers benefits from weighing up the relative significance of different categories of user types, considering the impact of age, gender, and other social groupings. So, in terms of gender, age, and social groupings, Kang and Yang, 2003, found that cultural backgrounds and long term environment experiences play an important role in people's judgment of sound preferences. It divides this judgment into two: the micro preference and the micro and the macro preferences. So the micro, it involves sounds preferences shared by people of the same age, gender, and personal differences, while macro preference, sound preferences shared by people who have lived and worked in the same environment.
On the next page.
The people advanced in age prefer sounds relating to nature, culture, or human activities, while the young preferred music and mechanical sounds, including music played on the streets, noise from vehicles, and music from stores. Wang and Chang specifically investigated goodness of fit, an issue of more concern in multimedia environments, that in non-multimedia environments is confirms the stereotype that men, often requiring constant arousal in order to persist with an activity or not usually concerned with whether or not the arousal source fits with its content. Women are usually intolerant of anything that doesn't fit. Males respond well to music, whether it is congruent or incongruent. Women respond badly to incongruent, believing it is better to have no music at all, better to sit when incongruent. Women prefer softer music rather than men who love loud and irritating ones.
And then,
Yeah.
Wesley, it's your part.
Yes. Okay, so today we're talking about website sound loop analysis. Okay, now in order to find a suitable example of sound macro preferencing in web design, the top 25 brands in 205, according to Interbrand Corporation, was surveyed. Okay, although a number of brand sites make sound, most do not allow cross-cultural comparison because they are marketed principally through a generic site with a low degree of cultural sensitivity. This perhaps to be expected in the case of the commercial sites of Disney and Nokia, which a specific culture is being marketed rather than appealed to. Now, today we are going to focus on those companies with sites dedicated to two different countries, McDonald's and Nescafe, and they were found to make use of sound. We'll focus on the largest data sources, which is the McDonald's. It builds on the cross-cultural analysis of websites in which the analysis of McDonald's sites from a visual perspective took place in November to December 2003, which contends that high context and low context cultures differ in imagery, layout, color, communication of values, and the assimilation of human presence still holds true. Next. Next.
I'm on the next.
Next.
Next after this.
Next after this.
I'm already on the next page.
Okay. So McDonald's had web pages dedicated to 60 different countries. Of these, 12 did not have dedicated website, and 8 were grouped under a single website entitled Middle East. 8 of the 41 websites, 20 did not use sound at all, including Israel, which had a muted icon, and a further 5 limited the use of sound to providing explicitly various forms of entertainment. Now, given that the looping is inevitably going to produce a cumulative effect of familiarity, resulting in a very high risk of irritation, the substance of the loop must somehow include elements that counteract familiarity if it is to be optimally effective. The trick was to introduce an element of surprise, that is a moment of musical complexity, ideally just before the loop begins or at the point of looping. So at this point, to minimize the likelihood of uncomfortable high arousal influx and irritation, you could choose a musical style in which short-term repetition is expected. Number 2, ensure that loop is long enough or contains enough contrasting elements or variation of sub-repetitions to provide interest. Next.
I'm on the next. 3.
Yes. 3, vary an additional statement before looping. 4, introduce an irregularity via rhythm or ornamentation to distract the loop point. This was to keep the viewers engaged. And number 5, hide the loop point by A, energizing the end of the loop so it leads to a harmonic resolution. B, make the return point the harmonic resolution. C, maximize timbral fusion. Number 6, Avoid having the soundtrack stop abruptly when browsing beyond the home page. The loop designer wishes to balance continuity with mid-arousal flags. She or he may take into account the following traits which characterize the Nescafe France. For example, the Nescafe France and uh, Masiras company examples. This is how they did it. They injected, number one, they injected energy, both rhythmically and ornamental before the return. Number two, this energy combined with harmonic resolution at a point of return and overall team role similarity, which facilitate continuity. And number three, irregular phrase patterns and sub-repetitions set up a slightly unpredictable sense of return, which, rather than undermining, may also facilitate continuity and yet. And number four, such continuity does not cause interest in the repetition to flag. The arrival point raises arousal by the moderate surprise it induces. Number four. Next.
There is next.
Okay, an important fact we should all understand is that people from different cultures use web interfaces to different ways. They hold different models, mental models for visual representations, navigations, interactions, and layouts, and have different communication patterns and expectations. In the context of globalization, web developers and designers have to make adaptations to fit the needs of the people from different cultures. Even though website designs focus more on their high-frequent users, they should be cautious on the other low users and the aspect of cross culture.
So I'm
The next
done.
thing we're going to talk about
I'm
is
just taking you through them. So next is on interactive loops. I'll be fast since we already used a lot of time. So interactive loops. So on loops, looping may also involve user interactions. Sometimes confusion may arise when identical auditory icons are used for cursor-initiated actions and incorporated into the track itself. In such cases, a danger of cognitive overload as well as irritation may be caused by the resultant auditory dissonance and perceived irregular changes to bits. This is where I mean where when you're browsing through a web page, like when a website designer uses same auditory icons for like when you're doing this, when you're doing that, it may cause irritation to the user, and this may be bad for the website and its market. So in this case, the web designer may incorporate different auditory icons or loops according to the user interaction on the website. So another possibility is to hand over full control, especially if one intends to adapt to users of different need for cognition, which is NFC, and empower them to modify their own arousal levels. So I'm talking on the handover control. This is the most effective when the links or visual icons for switching to different loops have high visibility on the homepage. It is an option that occurs in sites as diverse as McDonald's, Guatemala, and London Sinfonietta. So in music, the idea of user interactivity has its roots as far as back as Mozart's musical dice game, which enabled players to piece together the pre-composed music to create a minuet, and later Cage's indeterminacy experiments, which highlighted the idea of listeners taking an active role in what they choose to hear. As Eno predicted, the idea of passive control has since developed into a system by which people can customize listening experiences themselves, changing the parameters of highly evolved raw material, according to Kelly. So before I take you on the conclusion, there is one some too frequently asked questions, like what is this? Is one as allowed to use copyrighted music in a website? The answer might be yes or no. It depends on the music and the rights. If the artist has allowed for it, it can be used. If the credits to be used or to be given to the artist, or some do not allow. Then mostly people ask about difference between auditory icons and musical icons. Auditory icons are mostly on what? They're just short sound messages. Mostly people know them as sound effects, but they're not really sound effects. Like when you drag in a file, the sound of paper from a file, the sound of paper, like you already know the sound. But musical icons are just like pitched. When you're moving from up, when you're going down the website, like some low tones, some low pitch can come. When you're going up, some high pitch. That's like, it's just some audio tones of music, audio messages. So in conclusion, according to Jermaine Greer, who famously proclaimed that the true art form of our time isn't music or dance or painting or poetry, it's marketing. Nor is this true than on the internet, where the concept of interactive work is fusing the worlds of Western arts and marketing in web environments. Audiovisual interactivity hooks together target users by encouraging them to invest time and effort in a product's basics concepts. In some cases, users literally constitute the artwork and sense of ownership. This instills may strengthen users' bonds with a site, brand, or product. So, music is seen to certain elements like entertainment,
Nani alikufunza kufanya
lyrical
hivyo kwanza?
persuasion,
Nani alikufunza kufanya hivyo? Nani alikufunza kufanya hivyo?
credibility, yours. So music is seen to introduce certain elements which include entertainment, lyrical persuasion, credibility via certain non-artists, and perhaps most important of all, a capacity of improving memorability, helping to embed the brand or product associations in the unconscious. So sound plays a major role in defining a site's image, and especially through the music, the identities of its use. Another important issue that has been raised in this chapter is that although the incorporation of sound into website can reap great rewards, it can ruin a perfectly adequate site if mishandled. Website designers need to consider not just what certain sounds or music say about a site, but also what they do not. Designers need to be especially sensitive not to alienate target users. In addition, designers should be sensitive to common irritation factors, careful balancing of the relationship between familiarity and complexity, and the mediation of arousal in relation to the amount of information to be presented. So this is our presentation, and I'm done.